Welcome to Tantra, Rediscovering Love and Fulfillment in Sex, a webinar collaboration between Center for Healthy Sex here in Los Angeles, California, and me, Dawn Cartwright. To begin, and you're all very welcome, to begin, I'd like to ask each of you to remember a fantastic sexual experience in your life, a peak moment. So let yourself go back through your memory banks. Maybe it was something that happened today. Maybe it's something that happened years ago. And let yourself remember a sexual experience that was really beautiful and very fulfilling for you. And as you remember that experience from your past, I'm curious how you felt. How did you feel when you were in that experience? And it could have been an experience with yourself, it might have been an experience with a partner, it may have been an experience that you had in nature or in meditation. How did you feel in that experience? And feel free to type in your responses in the comments box at the bottom left corner of your screen if you like. What were the qualities of that sexual experience that made it extraordinary for you? I remember for myself many years ago, I was involved with a very passionate man, and we're spending the weekend with his family, and you know how it is, you go to spend the weekend with the parents, and we were put in his younger brother's bedroom to sleep for the weekend. And in this bedroom, there were only bunk beds. So we sort of looked at each other and I thought, this is going to be interesting, to sleep in this, this adolescent boy's bedroom with the bunk beds. But something really extraordinary happened for us that night. And I think sometimes it's having these unexpected circumstances that lead to extraordinary experiences. So for us, here we are, we have the time with our family, and they're Colombian families. There was lots of food and lots of, sitting around the table until late at night. And when we finally went to bed, I shared with him this idea I had for something creative that we could do based on the bunk bed configuration. And it opened the door to this really extraordinary experience that we both had that was adventurous and deep and connecting. It was very pleasurable. It was sort of mysterious, and it gave, I think, both of us, and certainly myself, this feeling of the great potential of sex, and how sort of our habitual way of making love was great. It was extraordinary, but that having this little something different, this bunk bed, added something very special to the experience. And so I'm inviting you, and I'm loving the responses we're getting here, connected with each other in the goddess, coming home, remembering this person on a cellular level, completely connected with partner, alive in my body, no mind, merging with pure energy. Many of you, that it opened you up to a greater experience of yourself. How you look at sex, and did it change the way you look at love? And did it change you in any way? I know for me, on that night, it really changed how I looked at sex. I had this idea before that it needed to be, very romantic and a big, sumptuous bed with lots of pillows and great high thread count sheets, and what I discovered was that no, it's my creativity that creates a special experience, an experience that's fulfilling. And I really appreciate many of you here in the way that you're sharing. It sounds like you have had similar experiences and have found ways of feeling that you can create sex that is fulfilling for you. Now, And yes, I see here from that sex can sometimes feel intimidating. So what I'd like to ask you is to think also somewhere in your past of a sexual experience that was disappointing, a low moment, a time when you maybe didn't feel fulfilled or you felt distant and disconnected. So what are some of the experiences that you had or may have had in the past that were disappointing? And what were the feelings that came up for you? Again, I remember for myself an experience of being sexual, and it was with the same man, and having this sort of really beautiful, what I felt was a very beautiful experience with him, feeling extraordinarily connected with him. And I was in sort of that really sensuous, affectionate mood, and felt very effusive with my affection and my appreciation for him and the loving. And he was in a different place. He was connected in a different way. You know, he was enjoying the physical closeness, and I remember in that moment feeling disappointed and sort of feeling alone, and feeling that though the sex was beautiful, there wasn't that overarching feeling of connection that I knew was possible. And in that I felt isolated, and that isolation was something that wasn't just limited or about him, it was also about myself. So my most revealing question, the last question that I'd like to ask you, and I see again that you're sharing some beautiful things here, that when you had the disappointing experiences, you felt disrespected, and that there was no feeling, that there was just bodies mechanically going through the motions and no intimacy, and miscommunication leading to an argument right in the middle of making love, alcohol fueled, and there was a sense of aloneness afterwards. So we've all had those experiences, and to me what that says is that we've, pushed the growth edge. We've taken some risks. We've had sex that was adventurous and fulfilling, and we've also had sex and experienced sex where we went outside those lines, and those were valuable too. And we discovered for ourselves, that's the best teacher, right? Are these experiences and these feelings that teach us where we feel that we're fully participating and loving and opening in sex, and the times when we feel that we're not there. And that gives us some kind of information about how to get back to a place that's fulfilling, a place that is meaningful for us. But yes, for those of you who have experienced sexual abuse in your life, there can be a lot of fear and a lot of tension and trepidation about sex and feeling vulnerable in sexuality. So intimate moments that are shared in sex are some of the most fulfilling experiences we can have, yet it's not uncommon for sex to be tangled with judgments and fears and hurts that prevent us from opening up. And in this webinar, we will demystify Tantra, which is a vast set of practices that build fulfilling sexual intimacy. Your screen. And I'll do my best to stay engaged. John Cartwright, and I've spent at least 22 years researching and studying the ancient and modern forms of Tantra. And I've created many classes and curricula that are comprehensive and research-based and experiential, that support individuals and couples in the exploration and practice of Tantra at every level of interest and experience. So from the Tantric standpoint, there's no right reason to have sex, and there's no right way to have sex. There's no right way to love. It's the focus through the Tantric path is on actualizing your potential, your creative potential in every way, especially as it has to do with your sexuality, and how that is an incredible concentrated form of actualizing your potential as a human being and the gifts you have to bring to the planet. In these last 22 years, I've seen countless women and men reach their ecstatic potential and have been blown open and inspired by many of them. Many of you are here on the call through this practice. And so it's a great honor to be able to share with you my great love for Tantra. Exotic and mysterious, Tantra is often misperceived as being a complex, esoteric practice. Sexuality, Tantra, is a method for achieving our full potential as lovers and human beings via these simple, heart-opening practices that are, in fact, easy to learn. The origins of Tantra, you ready for this one? This one's sort of astonishing. The origins of Tantra have been traced back 25,000 years. Yeah, 25,000 years to the Upper Paleolithic era. There were stones imprinted with triangles found from that era. And the triangle, as shown in our first slide, symbolizes the method by which the universe is created, the geometric representation of creation. And if you think about it, it'll make a lot of sense to you. The triangle represents many things. The Trinity is important in many cultures. And in this particular culture, in the Tantric culture, the Trinity or the triangle represents mother, father, and child. Now here's what's also interesting about Tantra is that mother, father, child is, it's literal. It's us, our parents and us. But it also represents us giving birth to a greater understanding of what it means to be human and a great expansion of the potential of love and how we experience that love. So early Tantrics were aware of the tremendous power of creative energy directly related to conception and birth, and they recognized, they were able to see. I think they had a lot more bandwidth back then. There was a lot less distracting them, so they could really feel this macrocosm within the microcosm of their lovemaking. That as they were making love, and as many of you I know have experienced, that you can at times literally feel the birth of the universe, the birth of life itself in this incredible generative experience. And so there are many beautiful practices coming out of these traditions that make it possible for the Tantrics of long ago and those of us today to explore the true potential of our sexuality, which is the quest that we're embarking upon together today. For the Tantrics of the Paleolithic era, fulfilling sex brought them closer to the secrets of the genesis of life. Attentive connection was essential. And each of us has our own unique personal definition of fulfilling sex. For some of us, fulfilling sex emphasizes pleasure and physical rapture. For others, fulfilling sex implies a deep emotional connection, a sharing of hearts. For still others, sex is a combination of these and more, and may even include ecstatic moments of spiritual reverie. Love and fulfilling sex are something many people value and perhaps even long for, and it goes beyond that. There are many benefits to fulfilling sex, and here are just a few. Let's have slide number 2. I invite you also, if you feel to add your benefits in our discussion. So the ones that I've listed here are increased vitality would be one benefit of fulfilling sex. Fulfilling sex boosts the immune system and the body in the body. It also increases our self-confidence. Pleasure leads to positive thoughts, and positive thoughts boost self-esteem and boosting our self-confidence in and out of the bedroom. Physical and emotional closeness is a benefit of fulfilling sex. Sex and orgasms result in increased levels of the hormone oxytocin, the love hormone, that helps you feel bonded to your partner and better experience connection. Rejuvenation is another benefit of fulfilling sex. Fulfilling sex oxygenates the body and gives us a glow. Peace and tranquility are another benefit. Fulfilling sex stimulates the release of prolactin, a hormone responsible for feelings of relaxation and warmth and tenderness. Touching and hugging can release your body's natural feel-good hormone, dopamine, and hormonal balance. Fulfilling sex can stimulate sex hormones such as estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, increasing libido. So Tantra is a method for us to keep us consistently in this fulfilling sex zone. And these practices boost our natural ability to love and create fulfilling sex. Now, what you might have noticed in my bullet points here is it starts to feel like we're a chemistry experiment because many of the benefits are linked to our biochemistry. And this, to me, is very, very interesting in how the biochemistry connects to the cosmos and that communication and that ability, actually, for us to sense and feel communication that's happening. All these hormones sensitize the body. All these biochemicals sensitize our body, which is essential for us as we start to activate some of the positive feedback loops that expand our senses, make us more open to love and connection, as opposed to creating contraction and a feeling of being distant or isolated, as many of us shared in our experience when sex was disappointing for us. We had that feeling more of contraction, right? So our biochemistry, our connection to the radio waves of the cosmos was depleted, or it was quieter, it was subdued. And when we had that experience where we were feeling more fulfilled, our cosmic radar screen dish was wide open and awake. And we found usually that the fulfilling sex that we were having was amplified beyond even the physical emotional connection. And this is the excitement that Tantra has to offer. And this is the I feel like the real gift of the Tantric practice is increasing our sensitivity and creating a more effective ability to tune in, not only to ourselves and each other, but again to this creative flow that is constant and consistent. So we are all naturally loving and sexual, believe it or not. Even the person who is honking their horn behind you in the traffic, or even children, even people who are elderly, we all have a natural, innate, loving sensibility, and we all have an innate sexuality that is expressed in many ways. The ways we expressed our sexuality when we were younger is different than how we express it today, and how we express it today is different than how it will be expressed as we grow older and into the end of life. But even the experience of being born is quite sexual, both for mother, father, and child, all three, and as is the experience of death, or so I've heard, or that birthing for all of us. And as we do that, first thing I'd like to do is bring up the next slide. And the next slide is the ways we are all naturally tantric. I think it's helpful for us to, and I find for myself in my own practice, to remind myself that these practices are actually leading me into a natural state of being. It's not about becoming, someone that I'm not. It's not about learning a skill so that I can, improve myself. It's about learning ways to be more me, which is pretty delightful once it starts all rolling and flowing. So the first ways that we're naturally connected or naturally tantric, is that we feel connected and we find meaning in life. And all of it's unique to each of us, the way that we find meaning. We might find meaning in relationships and our ability to be the best we can be as a partner and a lover. We might find meaning in nature. Might feel a real connection when we're out in nature. We might find meaning in our creativity and in our work. And meaning means and creates connection. And we're all connected in some way. So you're naturally tantric. You are connected. And I invite you to feel that right now. And another way that we are tantric is that lovemaking is always new, always inspiring. Now, I will admit for myself that there are definitely moments when I have to remind myself of this one, because it's very easy, I find, to find a sexual style or find a lovemaking style that feels so good. Why would I do anything else, right? Whether it's making love with myself or making love with a partner. And I've learned well from my teacher, who always said to me, pleasure is a discipline. It's something, and growing is a discipline, which means that rather than default into what is comfortable and familiar, that I take risks at times to go into areas that might be a little uncomfortable. And expand my sexual repertoire. So even when sex is challenging or non-existent, there's often a part of us that longs for what we know that sex could be. And somewhere deep inside, we are endlessly sexually creative. That's one of the beautiful things about human beings. There's always that little bit of longing for that sexual creativity to be expressed. Another way that we're naturally tantric is that we're often astonished by unexpected beauty. We catch ourselves astonished by simple moments throughout the week. Moments when we see that ocean reflecting the moonlight, or we witness our children learn something new, or we look at our partner and marvel at the small details that make them who they are. We find unexpected beauty in unexpected moments. And that's tantric. For the tantric, affection is an art form. We enjoy and look forward to affection and time being close. We feel nourished and generous with our affection. And affection can happen in many different ways. It can be physical affection, but it can also be just holding someone in our loving attention. Sometimes, for some people, that's a very powerful way to receive affection and a way that works for them. And it's learning how to be an artist, how to really sense the kind of affection that is going to create a sense of needing, as opposed to a sense of me first, give me what I want. When we're looking for something, then there's a chance that we're going to miss connection, which means finding where we meet, what the two sides bring together. Another way that we're naturally tantric is that we sense the underlying energy of those around us. We're tuned in and we sense the bigger picture, and we're open to interacting with and about what's really going on with patience and understanding. So there's expanded ability to be accepting and even be curious about what we sense, and realizing that our brain, I heard this recently from someone, is probably the least trustable perceiver. But there's another sensing that we all have that's far more reliable. It brings us closer and creates fulfillment. And for the tantric, love is a self-generated, sustainable, and abundant experience. We feel love and loved often and for no apparent reason. We have found, at least in moments, the joy of life. So these are some ways that we are all naturally tantric. Maybe not 100% of the time, but I would guess that most of you have experienced one or more of these at some time. So being vibrant and loving and connected and fulfilled is our natural state of being, yet none of us is in the zone all the time. And from the tantric standpoint, feeling shut down or numb or confused about love and sex is a natural and important part of the human sexual journey. It's something that we all experience at times. And it can be helpful to view these less comfortable experiences and moods as gateways to greater freedom and deeper understanding, making us compassionate. I say it increases our bandwidth as lovers. And the opportunity for growth in this way continues through life. For the tantric, we welcome those times when things are different and maybe even disorienting, because we know we have an opportunity to grow and become bigger as lovers and experience more fulfillment and more pleasure. So some of the reasons that we aren't having sex, I've listed here, and then we'll have the next slide and just for some of the reasons that we might be either not having sex or sort of limiting our love potential sexually is, and this is whether you're single or you're in partnership. I know so many people think that sex is something that requires a partner. I can assure you having a partner is fantastic, and it's possible to have an incredibly fulfilling sexual life as a single. I'm single and I'm having the best sex of my life. I can share that with you now. I'm take a moment here. I've been practicing Tantra, for 22 years, and that was something that for me, like many of you, was very natural, and it was more saying yes to the depth and the fulfillment that I was already experiencing in my sexuality and trusting it, as opposed to believing sort of some of the messages that I was getting growing up that, sex is something that you do when once you've got all your chores done. It was kind of that sort of thing. It was like, all the good things, like going outside after you finish your homework, or you can have a treat when you finish your dinner. Like, who thought of all this? And, so I was brought up with that, sex is something that once you've got everything else handled, then you can have sex. And how many of us live that way? Once the work day's over and the kids are fed and the laundry's done, okay, then we'll have sex. We're so exhausted that we don't have time. And so what I learned, thank God, early on in my 20s and 30s, was that I could make sex a priority in my life, and I could make it the number one priority in my life. And that by doing that, I wasn't being gluttonous or selfish or nymphomaniac, even though those might be some labels used in our culture. What I learned that by doing that was that it created an incredible vitality and glow and abundant feeling of belonging. And that is something that the tantric practices have helped me cultivate and helped me strengthen and have even helped me amplify. I'm now 53, and I had always heard that, in your 50s it's all over, you dry up, and as I said before, it's honestly, I can honestly tell you that the fulfillment that I'm experiencing now is blowing my mind and changing my life in huge and dramatic ways. So some of the reasons we aren't having sex, we're all guilty of this sometimes, is stress. So in order to get and stay aroused, we have to be receptive. And if we're stressed, we can't feel pleasure. There are two different neural pathways. And Tantra practices melt stress away and bring us into that receptive state. Another reason we may not be having fulfilling sex is emotional disconnection. Our heart is essential to fulfilling sex. Quite literally, the erections in both women and men happen because the heart is flowing. the two messes we experience, which creates a good fit sexually, which creates sensitivity sexually, is directly connected to the heart. So if our heart's not open, if we're not feeling emotionally connected, then it's nearly impossible to experience fulfilling sex. Wonderful, I see, which is why I've started calling it pleasure meditation. So that. The next reason we might not be having sex is that we're depressed. Depression makes our libido go downhill, and the neurotransmitter serotonin is important in arousal. So depression is something to look at. Another reason we might not be having sex is negative body image. And I've definitely had this one in my life, the times where, the lights go off, I jump in bed, or just have those sort of judgments. So negative body image creates armoring in the body. So we literally create walls around ourselves and become invisible. And this affects us not only in having fulfilling sex and love, but it also blocks us from being close to people that we care for or attracting partners who are our match. There's this armoring that happens because of our negative body image. And these walls block our sexual receptivity and arousal. Another experience that can block us from having fulfilling sex is low self-esteem. So that affects us similarly. Our walls go up as a result of feeling less than positive about ourselves. And those walls block pleasure. Exhaustion is another reason that we may not be having sex. Our body needs sleep more than it needs sex. So if you're not sleeping enough, your libido shuts down. Performance anxiety. Sex works best when we're connected to our body and the sensations of closeness and pleasure, rather than being caught in our head worrying about performance. Unresolved sexual past. So past experiences can keep us stuck in the past, and freedom can arise when we allow ourselves to sense the world around us as it is now. So Tantra turns those blocks into breakthroughs by teaching us ways to open our heart and find acceptance, create meaningful moments, and engage in life fully. Experience true intimacy, to feel things that we don't normally make space to feel, and sense feelings we normally push away. Tantra also helps us find acceptance and helps us let go of taking things personally. Phew, big one. And we discover new love and pleasure, realizing that love and pleasure change as the years go by, and to welcome and celebrate these changes and to experience fulfillment and maturity. And we gain sexual confidence. We learn to trust pleasure and listen to the body rather than thoughts or comparisons. We extend our orgasm. We learn to build sexual pleasure and increase love, connection, and intensity through these practices. And we bring playfulness into our sexuality. We realize that laughter can also bring us closer, and it releases tension, and it creates pleasure. If you've ever had a laughing orgasm, you know what I mean. So all of these are ways to initiate positive feedback loops that are designed to steadily increase sexual arousal and interest benefits of having sex. And again, what it really boils down to is this miraculous body that we're inhabiting and how we can amplify its potential so that these positive feedback loops, which orient us in the zone of fulfilling sex and deep connected love. And once they get going, they're cycling themselves, and we sort of get to enter this river of experience. Our nervous system shifts into gear in a completely new way. And I definitely feel in my own experience that it's about the realization of the human potential, that what this body is capable of. You know, we all hear stories about the brain and how we only use a very small percentage of the brain. We use a very small percentage of our body, actually, and we're using a very very, very small percentage of our sexual potential. So let's, beautiful. So here are some ways that Tantra helps us begin to break through. And, sometimes I see it as becoming superhumans, although it's actually just becoming real humans, real sexual beings. The Tantra reveals to us that there are many doors to love and fulfilling sex. Here are a few. And you can think of these as gateways. Sometimes I call them erogenous zones of the body, heart, and spirit. I wrote something a couple of weeks ago. It's just a little poem about the erogenous zones. I said that the erogenous zones appear like ultrasonic jewels scattered across the inner landscape of the body. They take us by the ears and pull us closer so that we truly listen. They wrap us around our hips. They wrap themselves around our hips and dig their heels into the backs of our thighs, making us feel. They melt our many excuses, fears, and distractions. They open new doors, bringing us closer to the fulfillment we are capable of and made for. So fulfilling sex is a fact, and it's tuning in that is the Tantric practice. So let's move now into some of these erogenous zones, some of these Tantric gates, some of the practices. And I know that we have some of you on the call today who are very new, and you're very welcome. And some of you who've been practicing for quite some time, you're very welcome as well. We're going to begin exploring 5 of the 10 Tantric gates. So these are actual practices that guide us into the experience of fulfillment, whatever that means for us. So here we go. I love that. Someone fell off the Tantra wagon. Yeah, I understand. I definitely understand that one. Okay, so here's our first practice. Attention. Now, as I mentioned before, Tantra is a path that invites us to be more sensitive and more attentive to the great connection that's already here. So I invite you right now just to notice something in your immediate surroundings. You can either notice my voice, that's something that's happening. You can look around and notice something that you can see. And as you're tuning into something in your environment, I invite you first just to give it your full attention. Just to imagine that what you're looking at or what you're listening to is the center of your universe. It's the center of your life. And I want you to notice what happens when you do that. And what would happen for you in your lovemaking if you were to give your full attention to what's appearing inside you. And then what I'd like you to do is to get distracted. Think about something else. Just distract yourself. So you're still listening to my voice. You're still looking at something around you. But you'll think about errands that you need to run later, or work that you have that's unfinished. And just notice what starts to happen in your body. And what's the difference for you? And if you like, you can enter your experience in the comments. When you give your full attention, either to your lover or to someone in your life, something that you're listening to something that you're looking at, how is that different than when you're distracted? Changes. And time speeds up. That's very true. When you're distracted, time speeds up. And when we're attentive, this feeling of being suspended in time can begin to be apparent. Vastly increases my sense of presence now. Yes. So we start to pick up more, we start to sense more, we start to feel more. And when we're attentive as opposed to when we're distracted. So we didn't go out and buy some super X product to increase our sensation. We simply tuned our attention into what was already happening, and the sensitivity began to increase. And Karen from the UK is saying that giving her full attention to the picture on the slide, there's so much in it. She could touch it, feel the warmth that was there, and distracted, it became just a picture. It's very true. And someone says they feel tension in their upper body when distracted, and that tension in our upper body is going to shut us down, not only to those that we feel attracted to, it's going to shut us down so that our genitals are unable to function at the optimum. And by petting the cat. Okay, great. Beautiful. So let's just move now to the second erogenous zone, the second practice. And this practice is beauty. And this erogenous zone is located in your heart. And many of you are already there just in what you've described as you became more present. You began to see beauty. Even though you're looking at a computer screen and a static picture, something starts to be communicated from behind the picture. You start to feel more. You start to sense more. Even from beyond what seemed to be there in the beginning, more is evident. And it's our ability to have this state of curiosity and this sort of sensitivity, even when things are tough, or maybe especially when things are tough. And even when we can't see the beauty, feeling it inside. So I invite you now, all of you, if you feel comfortable. Thank you, Deborah and Paul. I love you very much. So they're saying that looking at the screen is appreciating beauty. I appreciate that. And someone said they're feeling the light. So let's do an experiment with beauty. If you feel comfortable, close your eyes. This is something that you can do in lovemaking with yourself or with a partner. And as you do that, just be attentive. And notice when you want to get distracted and the mind is so ready to go through its whole list of things and thoughts. And notice what happens if you close your eyes and you just bring your attention to you. And making yourself the center of your universe for a moment. And then take another step and become even more attentive with yourself. Almost like you're walking deeper and deeper into doors leading you closer to yourself. And what do you notice there when you're attentive, even when you're on your own, even when it's just you? Then you can open your eyes if you're ready. And now we'll move to the third practice, subtlety. This practice has to do with listening, seeing, touching, tasting, and sensing. It's the intensity that happens when you dare to feel everything there is to feel without any guarantees and no expectations and no goals. When we allow ourselves to be a blank slate and touch and taste and feel our bodies for the very first time every time. So I invite you right now, again, maybe just to place your hand on your heart. Or if you're experiencing the webinar with a partner, maybe you can reach out and place your hand on your partner's heart. And I invite you to feel the subtlety of the experience. So obviously, there's the concrete. You can feel a hand, you can feel it on your heart. But what are some of the subtleties that are there? And as you begin to tune into those subtleties, what do you notice happening? What do you begin to feel as you open your senses, even in this very, very simple practice? And just as we use a small percentage of our brain, a small percentage of the potential of our body, we sense a very small percentage of the sensing capacity of our genitals. And so this practice of subtlety begins to create more sensitivity in the body and trains our brain to focus there and sort of to be in this constant curious adventure. And you can actually almost maybe feel your body getting a little larger. Maybe you even feel your hand getting a little larger. Everything starts to become more pervasive. Beautiful. And then just opening your eyes when you're ready. And we'll move on to the fourth Tantric gate. And I invite you just to notice also the mood of this webinar, how it's starting to shift as we move through these gates. There's a viscosity and a deepening that's happening even with us all around the world as we begin to activate the potential of our body using these practices. So the first gate is consistency. This zone exists in the place between us. And it's about feeling connected even when we're apart, even when we're alone. This is about the ability to realize that connection is something that we're carrying around inside of ourselves and then that we share rather than a feeling that we're starved for and looking outside of ourselves to cultivate. So once again, if you feel comfortable closing your eyes, I invite you just to close your eyes and feel the connection with everyone here on the webinar. Yeah, that was pretty immediate, so I felt it. I'm sure many of you did too. And then as you feel it, let's go through the gates, right? So some of you are feeling the connection. If you don't feel it, that's great too. Just stay with me. Let's keep going. So as you feel the connection of all of us on the webinar, I invite you to give that all your attention as if it's the center of your universe. And recognize your own beauty in the connection. And with our video audience, yes. And our telephone audience, everybody. And our that we're giving attention to this connection. We're sensing our own beauty in the connection, what we're bringing. We're sensing this subtlety, the sensations that are arising as we tune in. It's pretty mysterious. And then keep your eyes closed. And we'll go into the fifth erogenous zone now, the fifth tantric gate. Take an easy breath. And this gate is holding on and letting go. I know that Hadley in Denver and I have experienced this, as I have with many of you on the call, where we're bonded. And we take the courage to bond. And then to be able to let go. It's a very deep feeling, letting someone in and finding ourselves in the process. So right now, just feeling this connection that we have with everyone that's here on this call, on this webinar. Feel the bond. And then be able to let go of that. Knowing that it's something that is actually always here. But that we can find ourselves, that it's not a need, that it's actually a reflection of ourselves. Beautiful. Let's take a few more breaths, opening your eyes when you feel ready. There are 5 more gates. I would love to share these with you, and I will. And I look forward to more and more exploring Tantra with all of you. And what I'd like to do is first to sort of do a recap of what we've explored today, and then open the floor for comments and questions. What we've looked at today is, what fulfilling sex is for all of us, and how it makes us feel, and how we know when we're in the zone, our sensing of when we feel that fulfillment and we feel that love is flowing, and how we know when we're out of the zone, when those positive feedback loops aren't flowing. And we've also looked at what contributes to that. What is it that we can be aware of in our lives that separates us from our feelings of, really being, I'm going to say it, sex-generated, to be a sex-generated human being. That's a new one. That's going to be my new tagline. What prevents that in our lives? And all of those things that get in the way of that are things that we can integrate, we can move beyond using these very simple practices. Now, of course, the practices that I'm sharing with you today are, thanks, Cheris. Yeah, Cheris liking that. I know, I'm loving it. These practices that I've shared with you today are some of my most recent research and work. I have been working with developing these gates, these 10 tantric gates, focused on the Mahavidyas. And some of you know the Mahavidyas very intimately. Some of you are just learning. Some of you have no idea. But these are very beautiful, beautiful tantric doorways. and have found an incredible potency in the subtlety of this practice. And so what I'd like to do now is open the floor for questions, comments, more sharing. What did you find in that experience that we just had all together, where we were feeling attentive and beauty and subtlety and consistency and holding on and letting go? What was that like for you? What did you discover? And what has been your own experience in your own life with some of these practices? And I'll ask you an easy question first. Lost in time together, trance state, beautiful. What happens when your partner is not into Tantra? Okay, this is a great question. I have another sound bite. This is my sound bite. It's that it takes two to tango, but it only takes one to Tantra. So if I am Tantric, then our lovemaking is Tantric. And that makes a lot of sense based on what we've learned today, that this connectivity is something that's always existing. So when I'm imagining it to be something outside myself that I have to somehow cultivate or manage or create with a partner, I'm taking the focus off the place where it's already happening. And I have this great story. I've told some of you this story many times, that I had a lover a few years ago, and this guy's stand-up comic from Philadelphia, just this really big Italian guy, knew nothing, never heard of Tantra, and yet we had this great connection. And there was this afternoon, we were making love, and I found myself getting a little distracted. So I was doing my practice. I was feeling him. I was being attentive. And suddenly he looks at me and goes, "Hey, babe, what just happened?" He goes, "It's like time stopped. I don't know." Like, and so for him, even though he wasn't practicing or had any knowledge of Tantra, the Tantric space opened and he felt it, and we were there together. So I invite you, not to use that as a reason not to explore. It only takes one to Tantra. And Karen, so Albayan, yes, wonderful, lightheaded, and connected to everything, beautiful. Karen Moore from the United Kingdom, even though this is a part of your everyday life, her everyday life, it was a reminder of just how powerful Tantra is. Thank you, you're welcome. Andy, hello Andy from Boulder, Colorado, feeling us all as one was beautiful and powerful, and yet no more so than letting go and feeling it all within. Yes, right? That's the thing, is it just all, it's like this wonderful geometric progression, compounding experience of everything growing and expanding. And Cherith says, wow, and Kat, thank you. So yes, and Albayan is saying that her husband isn't Tantric, but her partner is. Yes, Cherith, get back on the Tantric train. So any more questions? I love questions. If anybody has any more questions, I know it's 1:00 now and some of you will have to go. There will be a recording available. Yeah, and especially those that know you really well. Come on, know me really well. Ask me something. If you were sitting here right now, what would you ask me? What would you want to learn about what we've experienced today? Have I ever had doubts? That's a really good question. I would say absolutely never. I've never had doubts about the power of my sexuality. What I have had is doubts about my relevancy in modern day culture. And that's been a very trying part of the journey for me, is that as I become more and more a sex generated person and through that having this extraordinary abundance that flows from that, I do at times wonder if I'm losing context with the world, and I love being in the world, and so that's a fear that comes sometimes of just feeling that I won't have the things that make life successful and make life what other people have told me is a happy life, and yet I'm living an extraordinarily happy life. So it's been letting go of the beliefs I had that I always thought I would get married young, have children young, bake pumpkin bread. I mean, I really had that vision of myself. And while I am that person is alive in me also. This path has kind of shown me how all those things are representing feelings inside myself that, again, are self-generated and not based on anything exterior. So it doesn't mean that I shouldn't get married, shouldn't have children, and shouldn't bake pumpkin bread, but that I shouldn't limit my happiness to those specific outcomes. And there are many times where I felt like I had choices, and I felt like I was choosing to feel more ecstatic, and realizing this conditioned fear that would mean I would lose, fill in the blank. Hasn't happened. But the packaging of what has happened in my life is very different than anything I could have imagined. I could not have dreamt my life up. Let's just say that. If even if I wanted to, could have never dreamt it up. So we've got some more great questions here. Thank you. Let me see. Here. Okay. Wonderful. It allows Georgina to experience life as full of love, beauty, kindness, and playfulness. And be sexual without being tantric. Discover it in your teens. And Devora and Paul from Pennsylvania love hearing your latest research. We frequently quote this week. Tantra is for me. Love this growth in you and feel it in ourselves too. Beautiful. Yes, I feel it in the two of you. Happy birthday. Question from Florida. How can those who identify as sex addicts practice Tantra without losing control? Is there a time in recovery when such a practice is good, or all throughout recovery? So this is an excellent question. For those who identify as sex addicts, I think the first step, of course, is to get intervention and treatment. And as you know, Center for Healthy Sex is extraordinary, the best treatment center in the world for sex addiction. And then at a point in the treatment, it's not unusual for the therapist there to make a recommendation that Tantra be considered as a bridge toward healthy sexuality, that these practices, because they're focusing on connecting, and addictive behavior is typically disconnected, these practices are very helpful in sex becoming something that's fulfilling and nourishing, as opposed to being something that's disconnecting and depleting. And I would speak with your therapist about when the time is right for that, when the timing is right. We found really wonderful collaborative results. Have I ever felt like I had to step outside of myself? I'm not sure what that question means, Cheris, so maybe you can explain that to me a little bit more. And Tantra's been very useful as an abuse survivor. Beautiful. Thank you. Tantra's wonderful healing matter. Insight focus. I would say, so I'm gonna improvise. I'm gonna riff here a little bit with Cheris' question. Have you ever felt like you had to step outside yourself? That's currently happening for me in my life. In order to live in the world, some things are happening for me in my life right now that are asking me to be a lot more myself than I've ever been, to teach a lot more of what, just to teach a lot more in general. And what I've had to do is just watch that part of me who is more comfortable being incidental, and as the part of me that is available to be loved grows. And that's a very big cultural shift inside me. And so there are moments where I see this part of me wanting to shrink and become more incidental, and I use these practices in order to stretch my capacity to feel loved. So yes, Georgina, it's a great question. I struggle to hold on to this all in a corporate environment. Surely there is a tantric approach to business. Oh yes, absolutely. And that's one of the things, as I was saying, like my work is becoming more and more corporate, which seems so crazy. How could that happen? And yet it's a goal that I set for myself a year ago. And as my work becomes more corporate, I'm learning ways of integrating it into that environment. And so what I've found is that our senses are always present and active. So even if I'm in my cubicle, I can still be attentive, or in a meeting or working with colleagues, that I can use these 5 gates that we've used today. I can be more attentive in my work, absolutely become much more attentive, let my work be the center of my universe, and feel the heart opening that happens there. To be in a meeting and feel this meeting as the center of the universe, to sort of explore and discover how it truly is. Every meeting we have, and this might even be helpful for Paul, the things that are happening in work, that even in a meeting, that meeting is the triangle. It's the creation of reality. And the more attention I give to it, the more that becomes evident. The more I take myself through those gates in the experience, then there's no difference between being in the corporate environment and being in my lover's arms. And that is something that I can honestly say to you. I laugh at myself. I told one of my friends recently, I said I feel a little embarrassed because I'm just as ecstatic, working on my taxes as I am when I'm with my lover. Is there something wrong with me? And it's these gates, and it's this realization that this is all it. There isn't anything that isn't it. There isn't anything that isn't love. There isn't anything that isn't fulfilling. There isn't anything that isn't sex. So Paul here, I have had my responses shift in a meeting I was hosting about how I responded to a challenge, yes. And Andy is acknowledging non-duality. Thank you. And currently Paul's also having to live with things he can't control, but finding that he needs to be himself throughout. And yes, the continuity is something that Cherith has been trying to achieve for a long time. So I feel, yes, you're very welcome, Georgina, and please let me know how it goes, because I feel like this is extremely important, that we see these practices and of Tantra and how they apply to sex, which is very important. And yet we know that Tantra is meant to be a way of life. It applies to everything that we do in life. It's not limited to the limited definition we have for sex, because sex is actually much more than what we've been taught. And by bringing our sex-generated self into the corporate environment, we're creating the kind of world that we feel aroused to live in, and we feel too messant to be in, which is a great gift to all of us. So I would like to thank all of you again very much for being here. Here's my contact information, and I would love to continue to explore Tantra with you. There are many video courses that I have, and online materials and working with me in person here in Santa Monica and or in on Skype. So I'd like to thank you all for your kind attention and lots of love to all of you. Yeah. Thank you for spending this time with me.